Hey everyone, Brendan Center here. So unfortunately, I've got some really sad news that hit me pretty hard today, finding out that original frontman for Great White, Jack Russell, has passed away at only 63 years old. And this comes just only about a month after the diagnosis of dementia. So that was a shock in and of itself there, that he was retiring from touring due to that diagnosis. And for it to be just about 1 month later to hear that he has passed away, I'm really bummed and sort of blown away by the whole thing. I want to do a little run through of his history. I want to talk about some of their achievements. I want to talk to you about a couple times that I got to meet the guys and just overall sort of revisit all the great things that make up not only Great White, but certainly Jack Russell. So I hope you guys will join me for that. I want to start back in though, where the band itself actually goes back quite some ways into 1977 when Jack Russell met Mark Kendall. Now, at that time, when Jack Russell joined Mark Kendall's band, they were not called Great White. That would come later on down the road. But unfortunately, in 1979, Jack Russell was arrested for a shooting. He would get sentenced to 8 months in prison, and off he would go. And at that point, Mark Kendall moved on and, got a different singer and different, band members and people that were in there. But come to find out that Jack Russell would only actually spend 18 months in prison and get released, and he would soon be back in the band. And by this point, the band had christened itself, changed its name. They were actually going under the name Dante Fox, for which Deadline has released this album here, a whole bunch of demos of theirs that you can check out. Really amazing stuff. If you're a fan of Great White, I do highly recommend it. Something else, just for the catalog of stuff to enjoy. But the band going by the name Dante Fox at that point would later change it to Great White and release their debut EP in 1982, simply called Out of the Night. And they didn't release their debut album until 1984. And of course, that's where a lot of people, think or know that the band picked up and started. But, going back to 1977, had Great White actually released material back in the 70s. And of course, that really helps tell us where their sound came from, and why they sounded that, bluesy hard rock sound, and the absolutely fantastic vocal style of Jack Russell, built on that whole notion of, the Led Zeppelin sound and Robert Plant and all of that sort of stuff. You can see why those correlations and connections were certainly made with all of that. But Great White coming out in 84 and then moving on with Shot in the Dark in 86. And we can argue this point all day long, but ultimately the band was part of the glam metal movement, even though they were much more in the bluesy hard rock vein. But me coming up during that time frame, Great White was a big band for me. They were one that I followed. I picked up all of their stuff. I absolutely fell in love with them. They would, certainly break out on their next two albums, the ones that we all know. Once Bitten from 87 and Twice Shy, the even bigger one from 1989. So this one here would go platinum, and it was really breaking the band big. But it was, of course, this one, in doing the cover of Once Bitten, Twice Shy, the Ian Hunter song, Mott the Hoople frontman, making that album go double platinum. So, if that's not big enough for you right there, having a platinum album, a double platinum album, their follow-up album, Hooked, which came out in 1991, and you got to remember the landscape of 1991 with grunge and the fall of glam metal and all of that sort of 80s rock and everything, still managed to go gold, and just shows you the quality of music that the band was. And they continued on. They made a couple more albums at that point. A really fantastic one, Psycho City. I think that was 1992. But in 1994, they released this one, Sail Away, a little bit of an oddity because it was an all-acoustic album. It was studio, but it was acoustic. And of course, it was capitalizing on the whole MTV Unplugged and stuff like that. And if you can see, I managed to meet the guys. I got to get out to an in-store signing and see them. And that was my first experience with the band. I had taken with me the original album cover for Hooked. I had all of the guys sign it. And this actually hangs behind me there on that blank spot on the wall. And I keep it in my music room and I really enjoy it. But I'll never forget when getting up there and talking to the guys and how down to earth they all were, especially Jack Russell. And a little side story on that, I asked Mark Kendall if he had any guitar picks on him, and he dug into his pocket and he gave me one, and it had the Great White logo, the shark on it and everything. And so I walked out of that getting them to sign all my stuff, having a quick conversation, and they were just cool guys. I remember, instead of being big, pompous rock stars the way some bands could be at that time, they weren't. They were really down to earth, and that always stuck in my mind. And so I just had great experience with them, and I was already a huge fan before that, but following that meet and greet and signing that I had from an in-store experience where they were actually coming out to promote this album, and they signed all my stuff. That was just such a cool experience. And the band took a little bit of time in between there. They released an album called Let It Rock, which is one of my personal favorites that I go back to all the time. I absolutely love that. But when the band returned in 1999 and put out Can't Get There From Here, this one here sort of recaptured all of that. It was the right time. There was a buzz behind all those 80s rock bands, and they were getting picked up and going out and playing bigger and bigger shows and stuff like that. And again, I got to meet Great White. This time it was the drummer Audie Desborough, where I went to go see Poison. And again, for all those people saying that Great White was not part of the glam metal movement, this lineup for this show just tells you where they fall and where people consider them. Because in 1999, Poison was on the road and they took out, opening for them, LA Guns, Great White, Rat, and of course Poison being the headliner. So that's why I at least grouped them in with all of that. Definitely the era and the time. But they're out on the road in 1999, selling out arenas with Poison. And they're playing, touring for this album here. And I remember seeing over to the side, I happen to have pretty good seats, so I was up front within a few rows of the front stage. And I looked over and I saw Audie Desborough just hanging out, checking out the crowd. He was, behind a barricade. And I always come prepared, man. I always bring, CD booklets. I bring a pen. I've got all my stuff. I can get things autographed. And I just jumped up and hauled ass over to him, introduced myself, got him to sign the CD, had a quick little conversation with him. And again, instead of him being too busy to spend time with me, he took the time to do that. And it's just kind of one after the other. You can have a great experience one time, but to have multiple experiences like that, again, tell me the kind of people that Great White as a band certainly was at the time, maybe still are in that regard. But Jack Russell being a part of that group and everything, and I just have such great memories with it. And unfortunately, though, they would decide to call it a day in 2001. It wouldn't last too long, though. Jack Russell himself decided to go out on the road under the band name and was playing shows. And this was around 2002 or so. But unfortunately, and we all know this story, tragedy struck, and at the Station nightclub in Rhode Island, which is the most famous aspect at how a lot of people actually know about Great White, and it's a shame that it has overshadowed all the other accomplishments and things that the band had done. But with that performance, pyrotechnics set off, igniting the nightclub, and over 100 people died in the fire, including Great White guitarist at the time, Ty Longley. So this wasn't only a thing where patrons and people that were there, but also band members and other people involved with Great White directly passed away as well, making it just doubly hard and a tragic event that it was. Ultimately, in the end of the day, and that was Jack Russell's version of Great White, the band itself would come back together in 2007 and reform, and they released 2 albums together, continuing things on before ultimately Jack Russell was fired in 2011. And there's been a long history of all of this with substance abuse and poor health conditions and things of that nature that ultimately led to him being terminated from the band. But it took a couple of years, but ultimately both parties reached an agreement where Jack Russell could go out as Jack Russell's Great White. So we did have Great White themselves with a different singer out there, but Jack Russell got to continue Great White himself going forward, and he put out an absolutely fantastic album. He saw it coming 2017. Took a number of years. He wasn't overly prolific in those later years, but we did get this absolutely fantastic album. And if you've never checked this one out, I would say to everybody right now, when you're done with this video, go check out this album, He Saw It Coming, Jack Russell's Great White. Just an absolutely fantastic album in the truest sense of Great White sounding material. And in all, Great White, Jack Russell with Great White would release 14 albums. He did 11 of them with the band proper. But once he left, including the release of this one, he would do 3 more. And those 2 additional ones was Led Zeppelin cover. So this was Great Zeppelin 2. There's a live album that Great White themselves did called Great Zeppelin. This builds on it, but it's studio versions. And then Once Bitten Acoustic Bytes, so it's the Once Bitten album performed entirely acoustically, both being studio renditions of things. So in all, 3 albums done under the Jack Russell's Great White. There was supposed to be Twice Shy recorded acoustically and Hooked. He was going to do a trilogy of this. Talked about it for a number of years and never came to fruition. I would love to think that those recordings are in the vault somewhere and we would see them, but I've never heard anything to that information. And that's just really an unfortunate thing, especially with Jack Russell passing so young at 63 when there could have been so much more life and performance out of him. And aside from Great White, he also released a few solo albums. First one up was 1996 during a break that Great White was taking to sort of recharge its batteries. But Shelter Me, this is a Japanese-only release at the time. It would later get wider distribution. That is Jack Russell on the front, taking on the role of, hobo or homeless person. Kind of thing for the album cover. And this one here, again, sounds very much like Great White. It's a fantastic album that is in the same blues hard rock sound. But in 2002, again, during that down period of Great White when they had broken up, he released another album called For You. And at the time, this was like a website-only release. Again, it got a later, wider distribution. But this album here, he basically tried to reinvent himself. So instead of sounding like Great White, he did a much more pop rock sounding thing, more crooning, more of the ballad-esque style stuff. Good, it showcased his vocals, but it wasn't the sound that we had grown up and known him for. And unfortunately, not too much attention came to that. And I think that's why Great White was put back together and he was out on the road very quickly doing that. But in all, between Great White, Jack Russell's Great White, the 2 solo releases, Jack Russell released 16 studio albums during his career, giving us a lot of beautiful music to enjoy, past, present, everything. And of course, I will always thank him for that and what we got from him. And so just recently, maybe about 2 months back, give or take, he released his autobiography. This one here, written with K.L. Dottie and, of course, Jack Russell together. The foreword is by Lita Ford, and it's called The True Tale of Mr. Bone, a Rock and Roll Narrative. This is, right now, it's not easily available. I mean, you can go on Amazon, you can grab it, but I mean, it's one of those ones that you'll have to work a little bit to hunt down and get. It's not, I don't know that you're going to find it at your local bookstore, but I found it. I bought it through a third-party marketplace type thing on Amazon and got it. I have not read it. I actually ordered this when I found out that he was retiring from touring due to the dementia, and I thought this would be a great cap to his life to read this. And I put it aside when I got it because I'd been so busy. And I'm actually kind of glad I hadn't dove into this yet, because now with his passing, I'm going to be able to pull this out. I can kick back, I can listen to some music, some great white, and enjoy and remember those wonderful times in the life and the memory that is Jack Russell. And again, all that it is that he gave us throughout his career. So rest in peace, Jack Russell. You will be missed, but never will you be forgotten. And again, I would ask all of you to take that moment to listen to some great white. Remember, your favorite tracks, your favorite album, what you grew up on, that sort of stuff. Pay sort of an internal mental tribute to Jack Russell, and be thankful for what it is that we got from him. All right, everyone, take care. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.